20 years ago, if you wanted to signal wealth, you bought a BMW, a Rolex, and a designer handbag. The status symbols were obvious. They were physical, and they were, in a strange way, easy to resist because everyone knew they were status symbols. You could look at a $50,000 car and say, I don't need that to prove anything. You could opt out of the game because you could see the game. That game is over, and the new one is much harder to win. It's because you can't see it. Today, the most expensive status signals in America don't look like luxury. They look like values. Organic groceries, boutique fitness classes, the right preschool, an NPR tote bag, a weekend farmer's market habit, a clean ingredient skincare routine. None of these feel like status purchases. They feel like good decisions, responsible decisions, the kind of choices a thoughtful, educated, health-conscious person would make. And that's exactly why they're so dangerous to your net worth. Because the old status spending had a built-in psychological alarm. You knew it was a splurge. The new status spending doesn't trigger that alarm. It disguises itself as self-improvement, good parenting, and moral responsibility. And it is quietly draining middle-class households of thousands of dollars a year while they believe they're making the smartest choices of their lives. In this video, you'll learn how the definition of looking rich shifted from visible luxury to invisible cultural signals, why the new version is more expensive and harder to cut, and how to identify which of your values-based purchases are actually status purchases wearing a different costume. To understand what happened, you need to go back about 125 years. In 1899, an economist named Thorstein Veblen published a book called The Theory of the Leisure Class, and he coined a term that defined spending for a century: conspicuous consumption. The idea was simple. Wealthy people bought expensive, visible things, silver flatware, ornate carriages, elaborately impractical clothing, specifically so that other people could see them. The point of the purchase was the display. Wealth was performed through objects. For most of the 20th century, that model held. The car in the driveway, the watch on the wrist, the label on the bag. Status was material, visible, and obvious. And because it was obvious, everyone, including the people doing the spending, understood the transaction. You were buying visibility. You were paying for recognition. But something shifted around the turn of the millennium, and sociologist Elizabeth Currid Halkett at USC documented it in extraordinary detail. Using decades of consumer expenditure data, she found that high-income, highly educated households were doing something unexpected. They were spending less on visible luxury goods and more on things you couldn't see. She calls this group the aspirational class, and their spending pattern is what she terms inconspicuous consumption, the deliberate pursuit of goods and services that signal knowledge, education, and cultural membership rather than raw wealth. Here's what that looks like in practice. The old elite bought a Mercedes. The aspirational class buys a used Subaru and spends the difference on a $40,000 a year preschool. The old elite wore Gucci. The aspirational class wears Patagonia and donates to the right causes. The old elite ate at French restaurants. The aspirational class eats high-end organic food from the farmer's market, takes $35 yoga classes, and hires a $25 an hour nanny who speaks Mandarin. None of these purchases look like status spending. They look like parenting, health, and environmental responsibility. And that's the shift Currid Halkett identified. The new elite establishes class barriers not through material display, but through practices that can only be accessed by people who possess what she calls rarefied information. You have to know which preschool matters. You have to know which groceries are clean. You have to know which podcast signals that you're in the club. The handbag said, I have money. The organic kale says, I have knowledge. And the second one is more powerful because no one, including the person buying it, recognizes it as a status purchase. Now here's where this becomes a wealth problem instead of just a cultural observation. The old conspicuous consumption was expensive, but it was concentrated. You bought the car once every 5 years. You bought the watch once. These were discrete, visible purchases with clear price tags that your brain registered as splurges. Inconspicuous consumption is different. It's diffuse. It's daily. It's woven into your routine so deeply that it feels like the way we live rather than what we spend on. And because it feels like identity rather than indulgence, it's almost impossible to cut. Let's put numbers on it. USDA data analyzed by LendingTree shows that organic produce costs an average of 52.6% more than conventional produce. For a family spending $800 a month on groceries, switching to mostly organic adds roughly $200 to to $300 per month, call it $3,000 a year. That's the organic premium alone. Now add the fitness class. The average boutique fitness membership, not a gym, a boutique studio for yoga, Pilates, bar, or cycling, runs $150 to $250 per month. A standard gym costs $30 to $50. The annual gap is $1,200 to $2,400 for the same exercise in a less aesthetically curated room. Add the childcare and education premium. The aspiration isn't daycare. It's a Montessori program, or a Reggio Emilia-inspired learning center, or a nanny with a child development degree. The cost difference between standard licensed daycare and the aspirational version can easily be $500 to $1,000 per month per child. Add the wardrobe, not fast fashion. That's passé. Not luxury labels? That's gauche. The aspirational uniform is ethical fashion. $60 organic cotton t-shirts, $120 sustainably made jeans, $200 sneakers from a brand that plants trees. Each individual item seems reasonable, but the cumulative wardrobe cost is 2 to 3 times what conventional clothing would run. Add the home, not a renovation, a curation. The aspirational home doesn't have furniture from a big box store. It has investment pieces. A $2,200 couch from a direct-to-consumer brand with a sustainability story, a $400 linen duvet cover, handmade ceramic dishes at $35 each. These purchases happen gradually, but over a year they add up to thousands. Now stack it. Organic groceries, $3,000 a year. Boutique fitness, $2,000. Aspirational childcare premium, $6,000 to $12,000. Ethical fashion, $1,500 to $3,000. Curated home goods, $2,000 to $4,000. A conservative estimate for the total inconspicuous consumption premium, the amount a middle-class household pays above what the equivalent functional choices would cost, is $15,000 to $25,000 per year, not on luxury. On values. Let's make this specific. 2 families, same household income, $110,000, same city, same number of kids, same careers. Family A shops at a regular grocery store, goes to a standard gym, sends their kids to licensed daycare, buys clothes from mainstream retailers, and furnishes their apartment from wherever the deals are. They aren't cheap, they aren't struggling, they're just not performing their consumption. Their total annual spending on these categories is roughly $40,000. Family B shops organic, does Pilates 3 times a week, sends their kids to a Montessori program, buys ethically made clothing, and is slowly replacing their IKEA furniture with investment pieces. They feel like they're making responsible choices. They also feel like they're always broke, which confuses them because they don't even buy anything extravagant. Their total spending on the same categories is roughly $58,000. The gap is $18,000 a year. Neither family perceives the difference as status spending. Family B sees it as better parenting, better health, and better values. But $18,000 a year invested in a low-cost index fund at a 7% average return compounds to roughly $900,000 over 25 years. That is the cost of inconspicuous consumption, almost $1 million, quietly transferred from their net worth to a set of purchases that function identically to their cheaper alternatives, but carry the correct cultural signal. Now, I want to be careful here because this is where the argument can go sideways. The point is not that organic food is bad, or that Pilates is a scam, or that Montessori education has no value. Some of these choices have real, measurable benefits. The organic produce does have fewer pesticides. The boutique fitness class might keep you more consistent. The better preschool might genuinely give your kid a stronger start. The point is that most people making these choices have never calculated the premium they're paying, have never asked whether the marginal benefit justifies the marginal cost, and most importantly, have never considered the possibility that these choices are functioning as status signals rather than purely rational decisions. Currid-Halkett's research is clear on this. The aspirational class's spending patterns reproduce wealth and deepen the class divide, but they deepen it in both directions. At the top, these choices compound advantage because the wealthy can afford the premium and still invest the surplus. In the middle, the same choices compound disadvantage because the premium eats the surplus that would have been invested. The wealthy family that buys organic, does Pilates, and sends their kids to Montessori still has $50,000 a year going into investment accounts. The middle-class family doing the exact same thing has $3,000 going into investment accounts. Same choices, same cultural signals, radically different financial trajectories. The aspirational lifestyle is designed for the people who can afford the full package. When the middle class adopts it selectively, the cost falls on the one category they can't see, their future wealth. So what do you actually do with this? You don't have to give up everything. You do have to start separating function from signal. 1. Run the substitution test on every values category. For each aspirational purchase, ask, is there a version that delivers 80% of the functional benefit at 40% of the cost? Frozen organic vegetables instead of fresh from the farmer's market. A well-reviewed gym instead of a boutique studio. A highly rated licensed daycare instead of the one with the Montessori branding. In most categories, the functional gap is small. The status gap is large. You're paying for the gap. 2. Calculate your inconspicuous premium quarterly. Pull 3 months of spending and tag every purchase that falls into the aspirational category: organic groceries, boutique fitness, premium childcare, ethical fashion, curated home goods. Add them up. Then calculate what the functional equivalent would have cost. The difference is your inconspicuous consumption premium. Most families have never seen this number. When they do, the reaction is almost always the same. They didn't realize how much these small things were adding up. 3. Apply the 10-year test. For each major aspirational category, calculate the annual premium and compound it at 7% over 10 years. The $200 a month organic grocery premium becomes $34,000 in a decade. The $200 a month boutique fitness premium becomes another $34,000. When you see the compounded cost of each individual small thing, you can make an informed decision about which ones are worth it to you and which ones were purchased because everyone in your social circle was doing it. 4. Watch for the moral lock-in effect. This is the hardest part. Conspicuous consumption was easy to cut because it felt like vanity. Inconspicuous consumption is hard to cut because it feels like virtue. Switching from organic to conventional feels like you're feeding your kids poison. Dropping Pilates for a regular gym feels like you're giving up on your health. Choosing a standard daycare feels like you're not investing in your child. None of that is true, but the feelings are real. And they're designed to be real. The entire aspirational economy runs on the emotional equation that spending more equals caring more. That is a marketing message, not a financial fact. The parent who invests $12,000 less in preschool branding and $12,000 more in a 529 plan is not a worse parent. They're a parent who understands the difference between signaling care and building security. 5. Audit your social circle's spending influence. This one matters because inconspicuous consumption is social. You don't start buying organic because you researched pesticide studies. You start because everyone at drop-off has a Whole Foods bag. You don't sign up for Pilates because you compared the research on exercise modalities. You sign up because 3 friends go. The spending baseline of your peer group sets the floor for what feels normal to you. And in aspirational communities, that floor is $15,000 to $25,000 a year, higher than it needs to be. Thorstein Veblen saw the leisure class buying silver spoons to prove they didn't need aluminum. 125 years later, the mechanism is identical. The product changed. The psychology didn't. The old version of looking rich cost you money because you could see the price tag. The new version costs more because you can't. It's hidden inside choices that feel like health, education, parenting, and ethics. And the fact that it feels virtuous instead of vain is exactly what makes it the most effective wealth drain of the 21st century. The people who build real wealth in this environment are not the ones who avoid every aspirational purchase. They're the ones who can tell the difference between a genuine investment in their well-being and a cultural tax disguised as a moral obligation. They buy the organic strawberries when the pesticide data justifies it, and skip the $60 organic cotton t-shirt when a $12 shirt from a mainstream brand does the same job. That distinction between function and signal, between value and performance, is worth more than any budgeting app or savings hack you'll ever find, because it doesn't just save you money on one purchase, it recalibrates the entire spending baseline that every other financial decision sits on top of. The old status game was expensive. The new one is more expensive. The only difference is that nobody playing it thinks they're playing. Now you know. I'm not a financial advisor, lawyer, therapist, or any other licensed professional. The content on this channel is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Everything shared here reflects my personal opinions and should not be taken as financial, investment, legal, medical, or relationship advice. Any stories, examples, or characters used are composite illustrations meant to explain ideas, not to represent real people or specific situations. Real-life outcomes vary widely because everyone's circumstances are different different, and any statistics referenced may come from studies with limitations and may not apply to every individual. Always do your own research and consider your full situation before making important decisions. When needed, consult a qualified professional who understands your personal circumstances.